Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee, and this is Gary Kildall. Gary, these two rather old-looking computers are really just about a year old here. The Commodore 64 and the Atari 800. These represented the battle between the low-end manufacturers just about a year ago. The 64 very successful. The 800 really the last machine before Jack Tramiel took over Atari. Today the battle is different. There's the Commodore Amiga, the Atari 520 ST, very sophisticated machines. Both have received lots of critical praise, but people are trying to figure out what you do with them. Is this another case of computer technology in search of a market?
Well, Stuart, the 64 and the 800 really took us through the first generation of home computers, but people have gone back to their VCRs and TV sets now. And to get the consumer attention, the second generation machines have to have higher resolution, more color, faster animation, better sound capability. That means higher performance processors and more memory. Now, these new machines, the 520 and the Amiga, give us that hardware capability, and it's really up to the software developers to make it happen.
Today, we're going to get up close and personal with the Commodore Amiga and the Atari 520 ST to see if one of these machines is just right for you. Now, before the computer manufacturer can sell you on a computer, he's got to sell the retailer first. So we're going to begin by going to Comdex in Las Vegas, the Computer Dealers Expo, to see how Commodore and Atari are pitching the middlemen.
Comdex, Las Vegas, 1985. At the world's largest computer show, Atari held court at one of the biggest booths on the floor. And at the centerpiece of the display was the star of Atari's computer lineup, the 520 ST. Nestled inside Atari's sprawling booth were dozens of software vendors, each with a sign and just enough space for a chair and a computer. Atari seemed to have at least two goals in mind: a highly visible presence at the show and a message to dealers that this was one computer company that didn't forget about software. From business to education to sophisticated graphics, the substance of Atari's show was the extensive variety of its software. Atari's most likely competition, the Commodore Amiga, was conspicuously absent from the Comdex show, although Commodore did hold private meetings with potential dealers. But in spite of its low-key sales pitch, Amiga has successfully wooed some unlikely dealers.
Now, our focus as a store has primarily been on business software, business computers, business users. So this is a little bit breaking new ground for us in that this machine has certainly a lot more of a home kind of focus than what we normally deal with.
The Amiga's dazzling graphics and advanced hardware has attracted equally sophisticated retail buyers.
So far, it's kind of been half and half between people who are just kind of anxious to have the latest and greatest and people who are interested in writing software for it. There are a lot of people who are extremely interested in writing software who haven't got into it yet because they're just kind of hanging in there waiting to see what the consumer response is going to be. And the consumer response has been great.
Joining us now in the studio is Rick Geiger, General Manager of Commodore Amiga. And next to Rick is Tim Mott, Vice President for Product Development and a co-founder of Electronic Arts, a software company which is writing for the Amiga. Gary?
Rick, I think everybody would like to see what the Amiga does, and I would like to go right into the demo.
Okay, fine. What we see here is what we call the workbench, which is the graphic user interface of the Amiga, and it works in a fashion like other graphics user interfaces. In addition, we also supply a command line interface down here so that people who are more familiar or have applications for command type interfaces can deal with something familiar. Now, of course, I'm sure that you've heard about the famous graphics and sound of the Amiga, and here's one of our classic demos we'll call the bouncing ball.
It's really impressive.
Now, Rick, this is an impressive demo, but I want you to tell me why it's impressive. What are we seeing that the computer can do?
Well, what you're seeing is synchronized moving graphics, color graphics with the sound all at the same time. And in addition to this, we still have down here below an application running.
So you're running a word processor while you're carrying on this sound graphics demo.
Yep, and I can correct my typos.
Now, Rick, we've heard a lot about special graphics hardware that's available on the Amiga. What basically is behind this?
Well, what's behind this is 25 DMA channels.
You may want to lower the bouncing ball, Rick, so we can hear you a better sound if you could. Thank you.
That provides for all of the graphics rendering functions, the hardware bit blit, all of these controlled by DMA channels so that they don't load down the 68,000. And in fact, in my office, I frequently run a telecommunications application along with word processing while simultaneously doing printing. So I'm sure you're familiar with the popularity of the sidekick type programs, and with the multitasking features of the Amiga, this makes those kinds of things very simple to do.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Tim, I want to get you in this. Electronic Arts is kind of going heavily into writing for Amiga, as I understand it. Tell me, number one, why you're excited about writing for a machine like that.
Well, the first reason is when we started the company 3 years ago, we envisioned a home computer of the future that would support much higher quality audio-visual effects than was possible 3 years ago. And we knew enough about the technology and custom VLSI technology to realize that that was something that was going to happen around this time frame. And when we first saw the Amiga, which was in prototype form about 2 years ago, it was real clear that that was a machine that had this kind of potential.
Okay, it looks like Deluxe Paint is up here and running, so...
Okay. Is that one of EA's new products for Amiga?
Right. Deluxe Paint is the first in a series of creativity products for the Amiga. Deluxe Paint is a painting program. In addition to all the usual features that you find in a painting program, it's got some unique features like...
Rick, you going to show us what goes on here while Tim talks? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, this, we're still loading up some disk files up, so they'll be up in a moment.
Now,
so
how do you see someone using Deluxe Paint? This is, you say, creativity tool?
It's a creativity tool. It's unusual in that it has enough features and powerful enough features for a professional user, but also has a lot of simplicity in the way you use it, such that it will be usable by consumers and people in the home.
What other kind of tools would you be coming out with?
Well, as I said, this is the first in a series, all of which will enable data to be exchanged between them. There's a deluxe printing program which will make it very easy to create banners and meeting notices, greeting cards, things like that. There's a deluxe music construction set, which is a version of a product that we currently have available on the Macintosh for music composition. And the last one in this series is Deluxe Video Construction Set, which will make use of the unique video features of the machine to enable someone to very simply put together video special effects. Okay, what we see here is a rendering of Botticelli's Venus.
Now, is that an original piece of art done on the Amiga or a digitized version?
No, that was done from scratch on the Amiga using this paint program. And
so someone knew how to use the program.
Right, this was done by a graphic designer.
Okay.
Here's another piece that was done. This is a picture of King Tut. You'll see here that what Rick's doing is using the menu features of the Amiga to bring in additional drawings. Here's a waterfall that was done, and this actually shows the color cycle animation capabilities in this software. You'll see that when he turns cycle on, that the water's now cycling and creating the effect of a moving waterfall.
And you're doing this by changing the palette colors?
Doing this by changing the color map registers in the hardware.
Rick, briefly, this is very impressive stuff, but people are asking the question, as Gary and I talked about at the beginning of the show, of who do you think is going to buy the Amiga? Where do you see it being used?
Well, I think the major strong point of the Amiga is that first and foremost, it's a powerful general-purpose computer. Added onto that is multitasking built in from the beginning. Then we took a look at what are the kinds of constraints that people bump into in trying to get their personal computers to do different things. And those are typically anytime they start to do any graphics, the performance goes away. Anytime they try and do any sound, the performance goes away. So if you want to design a friendly graphics user interface, then the very first thing you start having is performance problems. And with the custom hardware, we've been able to take care of all of that.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. So we've gotten an introduction to the Commodore Amiga. In just a minute, we'll look at the Atari 520 ST, so stay with us.